New York basketball, stand up because tonight it's Knicks versus Nets at the Garden. So let's talk to our New York Post Nets beat writer, Brian Lewis, because the Nets aren't coming into this one with that I'm little brother type attitude. Mr. Lewis, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm ready for an NBA Cup game. The ones we've seen before have been some really good basketball. But before we get into breaking this one down, game one of two back-to-back games for these teams, are there any updates on the health of some of the Nets' key players going into this one? Who's playing, who's out?
Well, Ben Simmons is back. He's available, which, I know anytime there's a Ben Simmons injury, fans will have something to say about it. And then when you hear Simmons and MRI in the same sentence, that's always a cause for concern. But he's fine. Dorian Finney-Smith is probable. I'd say the biggest worry is Nick Claxton, who's now questionable with a back injury. So that's obviously the biggest concern, especially when, you're dealing with a team that can be as physical and operate in the paint as much as the Knicks do.
All right, we got one team at 5-6, the other at 5-7. So if I were to tell you that the Knicks and the Nets would basically have the same record going into their first matchup of the season, then you'd say what?
Really? That probably would have been my reaction. Listen, I'd say that the Nets are exceeding expectations, and I would have said that the Knicks were underachieving. Now it's also early days, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'd say by any expectation, the Nets have played better than anybody would have projected to this point in the season.
Going into this one, I've been telling people that there is a lot of pressure on the Knicks for that very same reason, the hype and the expectations. But there's even more pressure on Mikal Bridges. What are you looking for when it comes to Bridges tonight? And where is the level of expectation and pressure for him to perform tonight against his former team?
I mean, I think there's pressure on Mikal Bridges to perform, period. I mean, yes, I understand that it's his former team, so fans love those kind of storylines and narratives. But what I'd say is when you give up, one, there is more pressure to perform when you are playing for the Knicks than you are when you are playing for the Nets. More external pressure. That's just the way it is. The fan base is different. It's larger. It's more demanding. I would also say, listen, when you give up a record 5 first-round picks for a player, tied for the most anybody's given up for a player, that player is going to be expected to perform, period. There were some that were disappointed with his 20 points a game last year, and he's down to 15 now. He's going to be expected to score more than that. He's going to be expected to shoot better than 30%. And he's going to be expected to defend better than he has defended so far at this juncture of the season. So I'd say there's just pressure on Bridges to perform, period, whether that's, tonight or Sunday against his former team or whether that's going forward over the next several months.
There's been a lot of talk the last couple of weeks about him changing his shooting style or his shooting form. Was that a thing when he was in Brooklyn?
He's always had a funky release. It's been not broken, but it's been quirky, and he's gotten away with it. I think probably Steph Bondy might have more insight on what he's looked like now with his release, but I'd say it's never been a pretty release. It's been effective, but as far as the changes that he's made to it since he got to the Garden, I would defer that to my esteemed colleague because he would be able to give you better intel on that than I could.
When he says Steph Bondi, that's our colleague, our New York Post Knicks beat writer, Stephen Bondi. So make sure you guys go check out his articles on Mikal Bridges, the shooting form and the style, because everyone's talking about it. But let's talk about Game 1 tonight. Game 1 of the heads-to-heads that they'll have this season. And it's an NBA Cup game, Brian. Break it down for us. How do the Nets take the first one?
Well, I think the first thing that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to outwork the Knicks, which is not easy, but that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to work a lot harder than they did 2 nights ago against Boston. And frankly, that was their worst game of the year by a margin. So that's the first thing. They'll also have to worry about shot diet, both theirs and the Knicks. They've done a great job of running people off the line. They've had allowed the fewest three-pointers in the league. That's going to have to continue tonight. They're going to have to at least somewhat control the Knicks and make them shoot, lower value mid-range shots rather than get up a lot of threes. And then, of course, their health inside. Listen, if Nick Claxton plays and Dorian Finney-Smith plays, then that's a different look. But if either or both of those guys are out, they're going to have to find ways to keep Karl Anthony Towns or anybody out of the paint. And that's an issue for them, especially if they're going to be shorthanded because, frankly, Ben Simmons, despite his 6'10", 240-pound frame, is not a center. They were forced into playing him at center, and when you watch how he played at center versus how he played at his natural position, which is point guard, it's night and day. He's big and he's strong, but he's not a center. He does not block shots. He is not a great post defender. And he is out of his depth at that particular position. At point guard, he's actually played well this year, but he's not a center.
Let's see how he performs at the Garden. I'm not even watching Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I'm glued into Knicks Nets tonight, especially because it's an NBA Cup game. Brian Lewis, thanks for joining us today, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me.